Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke of Italy, and welcome back to another music review. So today we're going to be reviewing my first ever chart. Today we're reviewing an essential Blackgaze listening chart. Now, I gotta admit, I'm a bit of a tourist towards black metal and shoegaze, which are the two genres that make up Blackgaze. They're kind of hybridized in a way. For example, my favorite black metal record would be Hivis Lasset Taros, if that's how you pronounce it. It's a Burzum record, Varg makes some banger black metal, and I'm also a big fan of Tales of Horror by Leviathan. There's nothing too avant-garde like out there in terms of black metal. Of course, an average music listener might not know these things. In shoegaze, I'm a true tourist. The farthest I've gone is LSD and the Search for God, and my favorite record's got to be Loveless. So it's not the most outlandish tastes, I guess you could say. It's pretty centralized, pretty normal. So you might say I don't have the best perspective on Blackgaze, but believe me, it's not as hard as you think to determine what's good in terms of Blackgaze, because I have a few categories on how I'd rank things here. So you got this chart here. Now, I've never had a chart review before, so I'm gonna say three things about albums other than describing them. I'm gonna either disqualify them or recommend or not recommend. I might disqualify an album and still recommend it, but that would only happen if I'll actually get into one in a second. You guys will see why. So Blackgaze is an interesting genre. It combines a bunch of black metal elements, which if you don't know, you got blast beats on the drums, you got tremolo picking, distorted guitars, wretched like Nazgul type vocals. It's metal. In shoegaze, you got the dreamlike qualities, hence its counterpart in the pop world, dream pop. But shoegaze, you essentially have distorted guitars in a way that's meant to be kind of warm and dreamlike and kind of spacey. A good example would be Kevin Shields from My Boy Valentine. He always has the whammy bar on every single note. He's got several reverse reverb pedals even to just make it sound like it's melting, which is a really interesting sound. And it kind of was pivotal for what My Bloody Valentine would be. So you're gonna hear me compare a lot to black metal bands, My Bloody Valentine, maybe Slowdive, and even Have a Nice Life, because that's the closest thing to a shoegaze dark ambient fusion I could think of. Because black metal has some more niche elements where it's got some dark ambient tracks, a lot of dungeon synth, especially with Burzum and a couple other groups. Burzum's the key synth. All right, so without further ado, let's get into this thing first. Now, I'll first want to cover the disqualified albums. So first off, you got Agalloch the Mantle. It's not a bad album by any means. I actually recommend this album. I need to listen to it a couple more times to kind of grasp what's going on here. Got some interesting religious concepts, but it's not Blackgaze. It's post black metal, which you're gonna see in a lot of albums on this list that they are post black metal that have gone the distance and become Blackgaze. But Agalloch, it's super the distortion is not as much there. There's much more emphasis on singing. It's very much post black metal. It's meant to be a reference to black metal, but the shoegaze elements are not there. They're just you can call it atmospheric, but I would not at all call it shoegaze. And you don't even necessarily have to embrace shoegaze specific traits to become blackgaze. Like atmospheric black metal kind of already was its own thing before shoegaze joined in the mix in 2007. So you don't necessarily need to be the most shoegazy to blackgaze in a way. But you're going to see that with a depressive suicidal black metal, which is a lot more positive sounding than you'd think, is much more akin to a shoegaze sound. So a couple more things I had to disqualify. These two I had to disqualify just because I couldn't find them anywhere. I look on Spotify, which is always my first pick. Bandcamp, because everything's on Bandcamp, but neither of those were there. I also looked on SoundCloud for one of these. I just couldn't find them. I did find one song on YouTube, and it sounded like a good few, but that's all I could find. So Onryo is one of the bands. It's named after a Japanese mythological creature. They had a good song, but I couldn't find them. The other band, if you could see on my chart there, it's got a white space for the name. And believe me, I looked up a band called White Space. Turns out there's a boomer rock cover band called White Space. It's pronounced White Space, but it's just a blank little rectangle like this, except boomer rock is the farthest thing from Blackgaze. This is the most hipstery genre you could think of. The next album I gotta disqualify is The Elk by Thrandenkind. Thrandenkind is mentioned a lot in Blackgaze discussions that I've come across over the past week or so. The thing is, they're not Blackgaze. They're not nearly enough shoegaze elements. They are post black metal, and I gotta admit, I don't recommend the album. It's just there are a bunch of transitions that are really jarring, and black metal's known for some somewhat jarring transitions, but these are just kind of weak. There's a strong element where a lot of the album is it's less lo-fi than normal black metal, but it's not like necessarily high quality production either, so it just kind of comes across as a little flat and a little lifeless even. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this album. Maybe you guys might like it if you like black metal. It's not my thing. This next group, I'm not gonna try and pronounce the name, but it's the one of the bird person that you can see there. It wasn't really Blackgaze either, but I really found it to be a lot like The Elk, but just better in every single way. Production was up to a higher standard. It showed a good restraint on distortion. It would only come in when it was necessary, and it felt very tasteful. I hate calling things in metal tasteful or most music tasteful. I want things that are like high quality, effective, and smart. But I guess you could describe it as tasteful. I think the mix could have been a little louder, but it's fine. It's a good record. I would recommend it. Another disqualification, there's a band called Devoured Earth from Latvia. This is their album The Sunshine Always Fades, and it's not Blackgaze. And I know I mentioned a lot that it's a lot of the stuff is post metal or post black metal. This is really just post rock. It's a lot of ambient soundscapes. There's a whole bunch of more meditative moments where you can sit back and think, and a lot of it's very, very soothing. Despite its depressive quality, I would basically describe it as if you took Have a Nice Life's Deathconsciousness, shortened it, but you went miles ahead post-rock direction, and you just made it super super ambient and very highly atmospheric. And that album's already atmospheric, so yeah, I'd recommend it if you like post-rock. So that's it for disqualifications. Let's get into the actual albums that we're going to be talking about today. So the first one I'm covering is actually the last one I heard in the list. It's Landloss, Melting Sun from Germany. Now, this album is one of the most eclectic picks in the whole list here. And first things first, if you look at this album cover, it is one of the most gorgeous things I have ever seen. It is beautiful. I've tried to find whoever did the artwork. I couldn't find the person, but it's, wow, truly gorgeous. But I found a lot of cool elements in this album. Like, it wasn't just black metal influenced. There were clearly influences from like Gent, Doom, and not a lot of thrash, but just all over like metalcore, even just like these chugs, these really cool parts. It was all singing throughout the album, but when it was placed there, it was rare, and it really came in as an extra, almost like an extra instrument instead of just conveying a general idea. It was very, very well used plays. While every song on this album had similar elements, they all had a part about them that peaked out. Like on Melting Sun 2, the drum part was super interesting. The last track was a true closer by being as dreamy as possible. The first track builds it up as this beautiful, just lush sea of sound, and the post-rock elements are still there. There's our post-rock elements, progressive rock elements. This album really hits every single direction you could want, and I can't recommend it enough. Next is a band that I'm not gonna try and attempt to name because they're from France. It's a lot more post-punk oriented than pretty much any other project on this whole list. A lot of really interesting bass grooves. But in my opinion, I think this album really runs out of gas in the B-sides. And while I found it interesting that Nej, who's the main singer of Alce, while he's in this and he's screaming while the girl's singing, and it's a good contrast, it felt a little out of place. The whole project just felt kind of not like the most fully thought through idea. but I can definitely appreciate it as like a historical part of Blackgaze because it's where the tradition went further. This next group, I think they're called Heretois, but I'm not gonna. Don't quote me on that. They're from Germany, so it doesn't sound like the name would be like that. So the Escape Part 1, bro, it's piano led, it's very pretty. Gives me high hopes about how the rest of the album's gonna sound. But you got some interesting effects choices here where the drums on the next track, Fatigue, are just blasted out and they have so much energy behind them. Another strength of this album on this song that's shown very well is that the emotional side of both shoegaze and black metal, where you have the hopelessness of black metal and the anguish and the dreamlike, surreal qualities of shoegaze, they're really brought to the forefront here, and I think this album shows that particularly well. There's the track Weltschmerz. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's one of my favorite tracks here, even though the symbol use here sounds a little weak, a little like it's what the tiny symbol in YYZ. But other than that, it's actually a very, very interesting song. It's got a huge switch up around 3 minutes. The black metal riffs are in your face, but yet they still remain a little bit dreamy at points. This song mostly reminded me of Woods of Desolation, which I'm gonna cover later. So yeah, I overall I'd recommend this album as a whole. It was a pretty decent project. So this leads me to quite possibly the most important Blackgaze project of all time. If you look at anyone's album charts of their own personal tastes, there's a good chance you're going to see this project on there, and you'll recognize it after a while for its really interesting album cover art. It's Sunbather by Deafheaven. Now, if you know them, you know them. Sunbather is a pretty fantastic album. Deafheaven is from San Francisco, so from home state of California, and only American group on this list, and they really bring interesting side of the genre. They've got this persona of kind of like expressing vice and anguish. You definitely see that on the title track Sunbather, where it's this envious track about how he wants to basically be with this sunbathing woman he sees on her lawn of her gorgeous house that is like reflecting sun like right in his eyes, and it's like blinding, which is actually the inspiration for the cover art. Yeah, you got Pecan Tree with super black metal tone, and the amount of anguish, wrath he has at his dad for making him he is the lead singer. Basically, I can talk about this album all day. It's a very strong pick. It's definitely got some post rock here. I know I haven't been mentioning any projects outside of this list so far, but definitely check out Ordinary Corrupt Human Love by Deafheaven. It's a great project. I find it super underrated. I actually currently like it more than Sunbather. I know Fantano 4. I guess I'll cry about it. It's a good project. All right, skipping a few projects that were DQ'd. We've got All Say, their debut album. Now, I'm gonna say straight up, I recommend this album. It's essential to understand how Blackgaze is coming to be in its current state. Of course, I don't find it is not nearly the best project on this list. It's a good project, but it rarely floored me. But the emotion was certainly there. It's definitely a melancholy feel the entire time. The only real flaw I had with this whole thing is that the last track it overextended itself, tried to break ground with some folk sounds, but the album was already good enough with shoegaze influence on the black metal sound. There's no screaming on this album, even though Nej is here. Thank you, I'll say, for using Nej to not scream your black metal. But this is a good place to start. I think if you're trying to get into the genre, definitely start with I'll Say's first album. And you might not even like it, but definitely start with that. That's how you get to know. All right, next project is from China. It's the band Dopamine. It's with their album Dying Away in the Deep Fall. So this album starts out with a spacey electric guitar melody. It kind of brings the shoegaze elements right up front. The second track got really mathy sounding shoegaze guitars, which ends with some tremolo solo. You got the Night of Confusion tracks, which I liked a lot. You got this Burzum style scream and a really good use of the stereo cut where it's bouncing back and forth. You got the last track here, which is actually the title track, which has like this doomy outro at the end of it, but it's also the heaviest overall. It's a good album. Wasn't my favorite on the list, but it was definitely good. I do recommend it. I definitely want to check out their other parts though, because on other Blackgaze lists, they recommend their other albums. So it's something to check out. Next, we have my personal favorite band, I'd say, out of this whole this whole chart here. Clouds Collide. This album is Until the Wind Stopped Blowing, but I gotta shout out They Don't Sleep Anymore. They Don't Sleep Anymore. I was recommended by a college professor, and I must say, it is phenomenal. It incorporates almost like a Gojira type scream throughout like the whole album. So if you're into that more, definitely listen to that. If you want dreamy death, go ahead with that. If you want like almost like Gojira emotions, a much more laid back concept behind the instrumentation, that's good. I love that album. Listen to it. I would put that on this list over half of the projects here. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Until the Wind Stops Blowing. First of all, I gotta say, so how I listened to this was I was walking my dog at around golden hour, and you look at the album cover. It is this really beautiful picture of someone sitting in a car with the light going through the windows on their face, and it perfectly captures that like feel. It's a little bit melancholic, a little bit nostalgic, a little bit anguished. It's a good array of emotions, and it peaks out in all these different directions. A bit of industrial sounds in there, a little bit, a good amount of doom influence at the very beginning of the album. This is an eclectic album. I can't praise it enough. Now we reach the Australian band Woods of Desolation. I mentioned them earlier. I gotta say, this album knocks it out of the park. This is called Torn Beyond Reasons, and I am not torn when I say that this album is amazing. So starting with just the first track, you're introduced to this vocal line that, for me, this is the most intense vocal performance I've ever heard. So this is actually depressive suicidal black metal, where I find that this is the best example of why you don't need necessarily direct shoegaze influence to reach the Blackgaze style. While shoegaze, you're floating in a cloud, I'd say it's depressive suicidal black metal. You could either have trudging, just darkened, almost like Blackened Doom type, where it's crushing. It's like just the sound of defeat. But this one sounds like almost like you're fighting in a battle. You are mortally wounded, lying on the ground, watching all of your friends die around you, and the light is fading from your eyes. You even got the track Darker Days, which has probably one of the most eclectic builds of anything on this album. It has the shoegazy intro that transitions into the black metal intro, and it's accompanied with screams, which switches between singing and screams, where while you might have Agalok with something where they might have this, I'm not gonna lie, kind of weaker wretched vocals that are meant to sound like Bathory, but here you've got these brutal ring wraith screams. It's almost like the exact same sound when the Witch King gets stabbed in the face in Lord of the Rings 3. Great movie. So you've got these immensely high pitched screams switching between this more low key, almost like math singing that's just, it's so defeated. I just want to give this guy a hug, but I'm afraid he'll just burst into flames. Yeah, I could go on and on about each track on this album, but I'm doing you a disservice. I gotta apologize. This album's not on Spotify, but it is on Bandcamp, which you can listen to for free at least once. I don't use Bandcamp that often, but 100% give it a listen. I don't think it has a set price, so I think if you spend just $1, you can own a download of this album. Absolutely give it a listen. And now we've reached the true depressive suicidal black metal with Austere to Lay Like Old Ashes. So this is a Welsh band, and it's a little more of the atmospheric side, a little less shoegazy, more atmospheric. So for that reason, I'm not disqualifying it. Another reason would be it's good. To Fade with the Dusk. Now, it's a typical depressive suicidal black metal, as it seems, but if you guys know about my taste in black metal, which you probably don't, I'm not big on symphonic elements in my black metal. Like Welcome the Dust by Emperor, I think it's weakened by those. I just find them a little cheesy. But there's a symphonic element in this track that I adore. And it's not the weird sounding horns. It is the chorals. On the choral singing. That's almost like echoing around you in this like it makes it truly feel epic, for lack of a better term. This album at points reminds me of Deathconsciousness, where it introduces a drum machine on the title track. Even on the title track, they're switching to normal vocals. It's truly beautiful. If I have any flaw with this album, the ending track Coma 2 is it's hit or miss for me. It's kind of the idea that like you really need to prepare yourself for longer tracks. Like for example, I could never just listen to Dope Smoker. I need a good 15 minutes to just kind of chill out or embark on that journey. It's a 20-minute, pretty much a guitar led track for about 60 minutes is the exact same riff. It's a good riff. It's meant to be hypnotic. It didn't hit for me the first time. After the 16th minute, it starts layering with some like haze effects. It turns okay. Um, Other than that, great album. You'll find it on Bandcamp. To round out this review, we have the first album of this list that I listened to for the purpose of this chart. Try Not to Destroy Everything You Love by Autumn for Crippled Children. Other than the gorgeous pink album cover that really conveys a sort of sense of nostalgia and pain, the name of this band is so good. And I haven't listened to it yet, but they released an album actually about a month ago. So that's on my list. You might say, Duke, why is it on your list? You're a total tourist at Blackgaze. Because this album, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, is either my favorite or second favorite on this whole chart. I think that nothing quite combines the more niche elements of shoegaze and black metal than this album. Even the first track, you start off with the synth-led intro, which is a little rarer on the other tracks. I think I heard it once on I'll Say, but it's definitely sparsely used. It's this little synth track. It's not much, but then you layer the black metal stuff, and it's tremolo picking plus the super dreamy guitars. It sounds like Kevin Shields. I don't want to dive too much into this album, because I don't want to spoil any moment that you might listen to for yourself, but it is, believe me, it's one of the most beautiful things you'll ever hear. If I have any issue with this, I think the track Avoiding Winter is definitely the weakest track here. It's got these synth arpeggios that don't seem like they match, and the drum part, it's almost like a dance beat. I'm not a fan. I don't hate the track, but it's certainly better than the rest. And then the last track, it kind of runs out of steam, partially because of a track I just mentioned, probably being so it makes it a little tired. Overall, fantastic album. Beautiful album art. Great songs. Give it a listen. And it's on Spotify. So, and if any of those are on Bandcamp, I will be putting the links in the description. Absolutely support some of these artists. I'm going to put everything I recommend in the description. It was a great time. I gotta admit, a lot of good projects. If any of you guys have those demos, access to those demos that I couldn't find, you can DM me on Twitter or Instagram. I would be more than willing to give them a listen and follow this video up. I am already going to follow this video up actually with another Blackgaze chart that I'm going to cover in about a probably like a month or so, because I want to give Blackgaze a bit of a rest because I've got a lot of stuff I want to get through. I won't be doing a music next week. I'm reviewing a music related topic, but it's not self. I'm just trying to listen to as much as I can until then, because I used to be much better at listening to just whatever I wanted to, just to get a better perspective on it. The top 42 list is still in the works, but that's it. I'm gotta admit, this has led me to probably 4 or 5 of my new favorite albums. This chart in total, I gotta say, it's a bad chart. The fact that 2 or 3 of these albums aren't even Blackgaze, it's not good, I gotta say. But those are picks that I like a lot, and there are other albums here that I'm gonna look into. Good. So that's it for this review. I hope you guys had a good time. I certainly had a great time. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will be seeing you guys later. You can subscribe, and hey, bye.